People who accidentally ruin someone's life without meaning to. What happened and how do you feel about it? No. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the Vancher channel. Also, please share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Let's get started. Story 1. Coworker would always talk about how Jessica and I were going to go here, or Jesse and I went there, or Jess and I got up to this, that, or the other. One day I ran into him and his wife in the wild. He introduced her only as my wife. I, of course, said, "Oh, Jessica, it's nice to meet you. I've heard so much about you." Gentle reader, his wife's name was not Jessica. I feel nothing about it. He shouldn't have been cheating on his wife, but if was going to, he shouldn't have spent years telling me about Jessica, then introduce his wife only as my wife. Story 2. I accidentally stumbled upon a $2.5 million Ponzi scheme when I was in finance. The person involved wound up committing tragic end once the feds got involved. Story 33. My good friend was scheduled to have surgery when it was discovered she had an aneurysm. I was with her at the hospital with her family, and right before she was taken away, she handed me her phone and said she wanted me to keep it until she was in recovery. She ended up dying on the table. She was a heavy smoker for 20 years, and that doctor couldn't find any good tissue to graft to save her. I turned her phone back on and handed it to her husband. It was maybe 24 hours after her passing when we discovered that she had been having an affair for years, had been embezzling money from the business to provide for her boyfriend, and signed over a car to him that he was supposedly still paying for. It broke all of us, and I still have unresolved feelings towards her for putting me in that position. I think she knew I would figure it out and expected me to cover for her. I love and miss you, Amy, but you're a boss for doing that to your family. Story 4. I do photography and videography at weddings. This particular wedding, half the guests spoke a language I'm not fluent in, and it was before AI translations existed. The mother of the bride said something derogatory about the groom's mom in her native language, and I included it in their video because she was smiling when she said it. Turns out the groom's mom spoke multiple languages. Story 5. I caught my brother-in-law essaying his 9-year-old daughter. He eliminated himself afterwards to avoid going to jail. I have no regrets. He had been essaying her since she was 5 years old. His own daughter, she will be 18 this year. Her life is 100x better with him gone. I am grateful I caught him because we wouldn't have known otherwise because he threatened her and her brothers into silence. I was only 21 years old at the time of catching him. It was a very traumatic thing to witness, let alone her experiencing it, but she is safe. And that is all that matters to me. Story 6. Many years ago, I was going to the track, harness races, and I asked a guy, Alan, if he wanted to tag along. He was 17, I think. He'd never even seen a horse before. Each race, I would tell him what I thought, and he'd either bet 2 or skip the race. 2 was important to him. Then in a late race, there was a horse named Minya Mitzvah. He got all excited. A Jewish horse. I gotta bet him. The horse was awful, and I told him so. Went off at 31. This was early winter, and there was a heavy fog obscuring the far side of the track. Off they go and disappear into the fog. Even the announcer saying, "Your guess is as good as mine." They're in the fog for a long time, and finally the first horse emerges. Alone. We're waiting for the rest of the pack, which eventually the field emerges, but the lead horse is way out in front. Who knows what happened in that fog? We can now see the colors, and sure enough, it's Minya Mitzvah. It cruises home, and Alan reveals that he bet 10. So now this kid suddenly has more money than he'd ever seen in his life. His brain is doing cartwheels. He was hooked. From that day on, he became a degenerate gambler, always chasing that high. Years later, he told me, "I can't stop. Even if you gave me $1 million, I'd be broke in a year." All because of a Jewish horse and me casually asking him if wanted to tag along. Story 7. Temporarily, I was looking after my friend's apartment while they were on vacation. There was building work outside and someone hit the downpipe of the toilet, which broke the ceramic toilet bowl, flooding the bathroom. I cleaned it all up, then complained to the building management and asked for the toilet to be replaced before they got back, which set off a series of events that led to them being evicted. It turned out they were illegally subletting without knowing it. I felt like absolute shoot at the time, but they ended up moving back to Australia because if it and living a good life there. So I'm okay with it now. Story 8. I work in human resources, and way back when I was new and naive, I had a home address change request for an employee come across my desk. I couldn't read the handwriting and wanted to be sure I put in the correct new address, so I called their house and their wife answered. I asked her about it, and much to my surprise, she said, "What the hell are you talking about?" The employee came up to me a few days later and said I didn't tell her I was moving out yet. Answer. Something similar happened to me. Guest had not paid his hotel room. Reminder letter was ignored. ignored. In desperation, I Googled his name and city in the phone book, found something called Yes, I Had Gotten the Right Number. His wife picked up. She was very interested, and only at the end, when I could hear her getting angry at her husband and her telling me he'll to pay, I realized that he must have had an affair or something and used the hotel for it. So when you have an affair, pay your hotel bills. Story 9. I was working for a federal program and had a boss who hired her sister without disclosing to higher-ups that it was her sister, a disclosure required by the program. Boss then paid the sister 2x the usual rate for the job, and sister was logging a lot of extra work hours that she hadn't actually been working. I only found out because my boss insisted I needed to do the timesheet inputs for her because she couldn't be bothered. Boss told me to take any questions to boss's boss and left for the day. I noticed the discrepancy immediately and went to boss's boss to let them know there was an issue with time tracking versus scheduling on her sister's timesheet and wanted to know what I should do. The sister thing was news to boss's boss, and then the discrepancy triggered an investigation that uncovered a whole bunch of other misuse of government funding. Boss lost her job, the FBI got involved, and boss eventually ended up with some massive fines and jail time. Knowing what I know now, I would accidentally report her again. Story 10. We kept having boxes of parts lost when they were shipped to customers and manufacturers, about $20K worth. I was in charge of operations, so I had to figure it out and keep it quiet since we didn't know if it was one of our employees or not. I installed a GPS tracker in a box and had to ship it like 5x back and forth between two of our locations until I finally got it figured out. It was an orchestration between one of our employees and a FedEx driver. Long story short, our HR fired our employer and alerted FedEx, who did the same. Our company did not press any civil charges, and the DA declined to prosecute because the evidence was very thin. I thought nothing of it for about 2 years, but then a fellow employee linked me to a news article that the former FedEx employee had recently died from a substances overdose while homeless. I don't know if my solving our theft problem directly caused it, but I'm sure it contributed to their downward spiral. Story 11. Not directly, but a friend came to me once to casually ask me about another friend and how they were handling their new job. The friend with the new job had been ecstatic because it was a huge opportunity for their career in an oversaturated field. It was essentially their big break. I told the first friend that they were loving it and handling it just fine, and they asked if they were stressed or anything. I offhandedly said something about them having friction with one of their coworkers, but that they were doing fine with it. What I didn't know is that friend asking me these questions was friends with the coworker and used what I told that friend to help get my friend fired for creating a toxic work environment. Not only was it very high school drama, but it ruined the trajectory of my friend's career completely, and they're still struggling today to find meaningful employment despite this happening 4 years ago. Answer: I'm surprised nobody said this to you, but the friend you talked to rated 1 didn't work at the company, and 2 didn't get any info they could actually use to somehow influence a company that don't work for to fire one of their employees. Moreover, you have to do something pretty serious and documented to get fired for something like that. Give what you've shared. There is no way that what you said has anything to do with the firing of your friend. If you like the content on the Vancher channel, please support it with a like. Let's continue. Story 12. I took video and pics for the yearbook at a high school assembly. It was some sort of dare, deal, don't do substances, strong men ripping phone books and do all sorts of strongman things. Took it home to review the tape, late 90s, and get pics developed. Mom saw it, asked for copies, as she paid for the pics and the film to be digitized and would be reimbursed by the school. No problem. Turns out she worked with one of them. She in human resources, him in whatever capacity, keeping it vague. He was out on workers' compensation and disability, saying he couldn't work or really move meaningfully in his life. He was almost claiming to be partially bedridden. That was not the case. Sorry, random strong guy. Story 13. When I was 15, my friends and I went to a Cincinnati Reds baseball game with a large group of high schoolers at Old Riverfront Stadium. My friends and I snuck off from the group and convinced a guy to buy us beer. When he handed the beer to us, a plainclothes police officer came up and flashed his badge and started to ask questions. When the guy was not forthcoming with answers and would not show his ID, the cop pulled out his cuffs and a tussle began as he tried to put them on the guy who bought us beer. As the tussle began, my friends and I took the opportunity to run and rejoined our large group in the upper seating on the opposite side of the stadium. I'm not sure if it ruined his life, but him buying beer for us certainly ruined his night, and I'm sure it cost him a bunch of legal fees. I wish I could tell him I'm sorry. Story 14. I unknowingly introduced a really good friend to the most toxic person I've ever come across in my life. My college buddy Chris, fake name, and I both had a Thursday afternoon off and decided to hit up a happy hour. It was early. There were only about a dozen people in the bar, including us and a group of 3 girls. One of the girls was 100 Chris's type, tall, thin, dark hair, outgoing, but he was a shy guy and didn't have the courage to strike up a conversation. 30 men and some liquid courage later, I take it upon myself to start chatting with the girls and specifically introduce Chris to the tall, dark-haired girl, Veronica, fake name for this story. She and her friends were all single, our age, in a nursing program at a crosstown school, and seemed like nice gals. Chris, myself, and the girls ended up shutting down the bar that night, and by 10 p.m., Chris and Veronica were fully sucking face and acting like the rest of us didn't exist. I was happy for him, but got a little nervous when they ended up leaving together and her friends started joking about not knowing what he was in for. Whatever, he's an adult, and far be it from me to rain on his parade. After that night, Chris effectively disappeared off the map. The only times I would see him was in class or at that same bar with Veronica. The dude just seemed off but refused to talk about it and insisted he was happy. Veronica, on the hand, refused to let him out of her sight, would make him wait outside the bathroom for her. Surprise, surprise, turns out Veronica was a complete sociopath narcissist, straight-up con artist who bled Chris dry, both emotionally and financially. Highlights include, but are not limited to, fake pregnancies, forcing him to cut off friends, demanding he drop classes to fit her schedule, and manipulating him into paying her rent, bills, lifestyle. Now, Chris came from a nice upper middle class who he was super close with, and apparently they rightfully had some suspicions about this girl. I had just figured he was head over heels for Veronica and ignoring us all, but I knew something was wrong when his mom called me and asked if I had spoken to Chris lately. Turns out he had drained his bank account and started racking up significant debt on the credit card he shared with parents, buying crazy expensive jewelry make-up clothes for Veronica. That was enough for his parents to drive the 4 hours from their hometown to stage a mini intervention. In the end, Chris had to drop out of school, move back home, and his parents ended up getting a restraining order against Veronica. His parents forced him to get a job to pay off the $3,000 he accrued and ended up forfeiting his partial football scholarship. I lost touch with him once he moved back home, but I sometimes wonder how his life would have turned out if he wanted to happy hour at Kelly's on that Thursday. Answer: that's a win-win story, dude. Your friend learned a lot from his experience with Veronica and seems unlikely to make the same mistake twice. This was an important experience, and his parents made it better by making sure he suffered some of the consequences of being with her. Applause all around. Some people are meant to be the lessons we learn in life. That was Veronica's function for sure. Story 15. I suggested a kid I knew at school to consider joining the military and using the GI Bill later in life after he wasn't able to get accepted to a college or university. He thought it was a fantastic idea, so he went for it. Dude's convoy hit a IED on his first deployment. He survived but has a litany of health problems. I feel terrible for suggesting it. Answer: you can tell this story and be the warning some people need. Imagine how many young people might be reading this. Your regret, his suffering, the lifelong consequences of a decision this big. OTOH, he could have ended up one of those folks who say the military saved them and gone on to have a great life. It's always going to be a risk, though. In the end, you didn't hold his hand and make him sign the papers. I wish society would be more honest about the pain many people suffer because of military service. It's not fair to young people when we gloss over it or glorify it without reservation. Story 16. Co-worker went on a road trip to Seattle. I jokingly asked him to bring back some heroin. I was not a user and didn't actually want any. It was clearly a joke. Well, the day that he's supposed to be back, he calls me and says he's running late and might not be there on time. So I don't get concerned when he's not in at his scheduled time. An hour late, and I call him again. No answer. He doesn't come in that night. Calls the next day. He was speeding excessively to get to work, still in another state, and got pulled over. He had some plant substance in the car, just a personal amount, but still not great. The problem was he had a very small amount of tar heroin he was bringing me back as a joke. That joke ruined his life. He had to move to that state in hopes of avoiding a charge for transporting substances over state lines. Since he had 2 separate kinds of substances, they pinned a dealing charge on him. It didn't end up in jail time, but long probation, and he had to live in a shoot place for years. I apologized to him and felt terrible. He never once blamed me or had any animosity. He knew it was his choice and that he had fudge up. I still felt bad about it. Story 17. He was fudge around at work, never getting shoot done, always calling out for bullshit reasons, etc. I ended up stuck doing all his work, so once when he called out for a splitting, puking migraine, then posted on Facebook about being at a concert, I narked. They fired him a few weeks later, and since his wife refused to work, they ended up losing their house. Answer: ooh, I got my boss fired for similar things. It didn't help that he carried out a high-ticket item, $500, without checking the receipts. It never got paid for, and he tried to get the team to cover it up. I went to a sister location on a day I was supposed to be working the full day with his jerk, 10 hours that day, under the pretense of additional training. This manager at the aforementioned sister location also covered my jerk for me, but I went 10 cities over and narked directly to HR, a singular woman in charge of the whole company's HR. Told her everything, from him abandoning work to do God knows what, taking 2 hours just to run to the bank literally down the street, being creepy as shoot with the younger women employees, 16-20, he was 35. His jerk kept withholding a promotion from me because I refused to act the assistant manager part without the assistant manager pay, without pointing out that I did not want to be his assistant manager. God, it was such a good day to was begging to just be allowed in and fire him. Incredibly FCKN liberating. Story 18. I don't take full blame, but I didn't help. Had a boss. He was not a good boss. Fudge employees, never came to work, raging alcoholic, good old boy type that didn't understand why I was so good at my job with my personality type, sales. He was a made man though. Basically, he was kept around because of connection with a high-level executive. Anyways, he was still on thin ice because he would regularly get partied too hard at company events and start fights or whatever. Still, he did advocate for me at times. He pissed me off, and when his boss came to town, who was also a piece of shoot but was forced to tolerate my boss, I unloaded. Let him know he was fudge employees, that he never worked, and that he was drinking again. A week or two later, my boss gets fired. New guy comes in who sucks maybe just a little less. Heard a couple years back my old boss I probably helped get fired died of liver disease at 43. Rumor is he was begging to just be allowed to die. Year later, the executive who always bailed him out also died. Not sure of the cause. Answer: chronic liver failure is the most miserable form of organ failure. It's an ugly and painful way to die. I wish I could take some patients in who are early in their struggle with adult beverage addiction to see some of my patients who are in late stages of chronic liver failure so they can know what the real risks of their choices are. Obviously, that wouldn't do everything because addiction is complicated, but I would hope it would make the theoretical more concrete for them. I also wish I could take teenagers on my infectious disease rounds at our public hospital to see all the gnarly infections people who are addicted to methamphetamines get caught up in. It's rough. Story 19. I was once the tool which got someone's career stalled, but I do not feel entirely responsible. I was in therapy at an agency and knew 2 friends who were therapists working there. I also had a third friend who had just committed tragic end. At the funeral of our mutual friend, one of the people I knew from the mental health agency gossiped about private and confidential information they had snooped into the dead person's file to read. At my next therapy session, I was deeply grieving the tragic end loss and outraged about the gossip from the dead person's file. So my therapist pressured me to reveal the name of who gossiped, and I refused. 2 days later, I got a phone call from my second friend who worked as a MSW therapist at the clinic and who had absolutely no idea about what was going down, as we had not even spoken in a year or so. And she asked me why she was being questioned and possibly disciplined due to this gossiping. So I was forced into a position of having to reveal who indeed had been unprofessional. And that was the end of her career. And it was handled so beautifully that to this day, she has no idea it was me who reported her. The incident happened in 1990. I've often wanted to tell her, but feel it is best to leave as is. She really did it to herself. Story 20. My childhood best friend and I were making a silly plan to sneak out of my room at night. We tied some sheets together to make a rope, movie style, and lowered it out of my 3rd floor bedroom window. She volunteered to go first, and after she was fully outside of my window, dangling in the air, the knots came loose. I watched her fall all the way down in slow motion and bounce off my water heater onto the grass. I ran outside, fully expecting her to be unconscious, or worse, but she was unexpectedly fine and already up and walking towards my front door. We swore ourselves to secrecy about this moment, never told anybody what happened because we were so embarrassed. It became something we joked about for a while after. We did a lot of dumb, dangerous things as kids, LOL. Over the years, we've grown apart, and now as adults, she's developed a lot of mental challenges she didn't have before. Memory issues, social skills, overall executive functioning. I think about her often. I can't help but suspect her falling out of my window had something to do with it. Answer: if it helps. As a kid, I was in constant car accidents. Mom actually eventually lost custody due to another DUI, oftentimes where I would hit my head. Have a lot of problems as an adult now. Executive function, short emotional fuse, memory gaps, not well liked. These included 2 actual concussions where I fully blacked out, once from getting punched, another from falling out of a shopping cart, only got medical attention for the latter. I finally brought it up to my doctor, who was like, well, that would have been helpful to know, yes. Scans later, no brain damage. I just have BPD. Lots of stuff can go haywire in growing up, but as other commenters have said, kiddos are super resilient. I wouldn't hedge your bets on brain damage. All that to say, you were little. You didn't know the rope would fail. You didn't know your friend could get hurt. If you wouldn't stand in front of a child that age and berate them the same way you may yourself, there's no reason to berate yourself, if that makes sense. You're also owed the kindness, compassion, and understanding that you would give that child. Story 21. I intervened when my close friends were tragic and they stopped being friends with me. It ruined their lives at the time. Many years later, they're alive and seem to have a good life and got married. I wasn't invited to the weddings. I tell myself it was worth it because it was the right thing to do, and at least they're alive. Answer: I had somebody do this to me in high school. They told the guidance counselor on me, informed the school that they were concerned for me, and I was placed in mandatory therapy through the school. I was really upset at the time, and that kind of led to the beginning of the end of our relationship. When I went on to university, we lost touch, and I haven't spoken to this friend in years, and I think about her all the darn time. I am so grateful to her for setting me on this path and helping me start my journey of self-healing. I am alive today because somebody saw that I was hurting and cared enough to do something about it. I am the best version of myself, happier than I've ever been, and absolutely thriving in life. And it all happened because of this friend. Please know that you made such an impact on their lives. And even if your friends aren't able to say thank you or don't know how to even begin the process of getting back in touch with you, it's very likely that you are on their minds and that they are grateful for the gift you gave them. People like you are heroes and leave lasting impressions on people like me. Story 22. I almost started a forest fire by accident once. I was burning a burn pile and I didn't take enough safety measures. The wind started gusting, which started the grass around it on fire. I kept putting it out and the wind would gust again, igniting it all over and over. I rushed to the house, called the fire department on myself, and rushed back outside with hoses, connecting many together to reach the fire. I got the fire put out after about half an acre burned. The fire department came after it was out. It would have reached the trees before they got there. I almost caused a major fire. I felt terrible about it, of course. My hands were blistered from trying to put it out with a shovel over and over. The grass was green, but there was dead, dry grass under it. Combined with the wind, it was just a nightmare. Answer: a friend and I lit part of the forest on fire at Fort Bragg, formerly Liberty, formerly Bragg. It was in the middle of a bunch of housing and had a children's playground in it. I was 8, he was 9, and we were playing with matches. We were making small camp fires and did an okay job at keeping it contained, but the day got windier and windier. Eventually, the wind started blowing embers around and caught the leaf litter on fire. Then it went crazy. Luckily, a few of the dads were home and noticed it before it got to housing. They kept it contained until the fire department got there. My friend and I had bolted before anyone noticed us, and we lived 2 rows from where it happened. None of those townhouses are there anymore, and even with such a good day, it's been over 30 years since it happened. Story 23. I was intimacy assaulted by another student living in my dorm during my first year of university. I spoke out about it, which led to 2 other women coming forward with similar experiences. A couple of months later, administration discovered he was growing substances in his room. This was grounds for being kicked out of residence. The next I heard about this guy was a couple of years later when an acquaintance had let me know he had gotten expelled from school, got mixed up with bad gambling, and committed tragic end. I feel fine because I worked in corporate for a grow. Tell the truth. Answer: this makes me feel better about telling my friends' acquaintances to not let my ex near me when he transferred to my university because he had intimacy assaulted me and stalked me, and I had a university stay-away order against him. Word spread, he couldn't make any friends and left shortly thereafter. Last I saw, his life went downhill after that. Felt so bad for being so vocal, but I had to, and I was actively dealing with it in PTSD. Story 24. 20 years ago, I was a computer tech at university. One day, my colleague has told me that she is reviewing a very interesting master's thesis and asked me whether I could find some authors mentioned in the references. Back then, everything was either not online or not easily searchable, so doing so required some Google Few. I have followed some obscure links and found a copy of the article that was referenced in one of the chapters. It turned out the whole chapter was basically a single citation. The student has only changed all the I's, i.e., instead of I have researched, it was the author has researched, etc. But of course, that is not how it works. That was literally on the eve of the defense of the thesis. It was a big scandal in the department. The student was kicked out, but given that they formally has finished their education, they could not repeat the year or anything like that. To receive the master's degree, they would have to essentially begin studies at a different department. Of course, it was not my fault. Still, being so instrumental in the demise of that person, even if completely deserved, made me feel quite strange. If you like the content on the Vancher channel, please support it with a like. Let's continue. Story 25. Almost. Years back, working at a hardware store, I knocked a full pallet of lime of a 20-high shelf. Came within inches of eliminate a person standing there. I hopped to the forklift grumbling about the mess I would have to clean up and saw the person standing there. Completely unharmed but still white as a sheet, pupils dilated. I repeatedly apologized, but my words never registered. They just walked away and left the store. Answer. As a non-native English speaker, I first wondered why a hardware store would keep a pallet of fruit more than 6 meters above the floor. So I checked what most here probably already knew. Limes, as well as a small quantity of lime, would usually refer to the fruit, but a large quantity of lime would refer to the material, though you wouldn't want a pallet of either to fall 4 meters and hit you. Story 26. I feel like if I hadn't moved out of the state, my mom wouldn't have overdosed. And it might even be true, but my life is good now and there's no way I could have stayed there anymore. But that's a guilt I've lived with for 10 years. Answer. Statistically, she would have overdosed eventually regardless of whether or not you had been there. The most likely outcome if you had stayed, you probably would have watched her OD. Maybe you would have gotten lucky and gotten her medical help in time to save her life that time. Because again, we've got statistics that show if someone ODs once, it's going to happen a second, third, maybe even a fourth time. If she didn't get clean to keep her kid in her life, she was never going to get clean and the substances were going to take her. It was just a matter of when. So instead of feeling guilty, try to find it in you to be thankful that you didn't have to go through the trauma of watching her OD. Story 27. When I was in high school, me and a friend of mine were trying to go to an MLB game. It was right before smartphones and his car didn't have GPS, so we got lost going there. Lost touch with him for a couple years before seeing him at a house party and brought it up laughing about how we got lost. Turns out he didn't tell his parents where we were going. His mom saw the toll bills from when we got lost and thought that it was his dad using the car to cheat on her, and that his dad slept on the couch for a year before my friend realized our excursion was a contributing factor to his parents fighting. When he told me the story, it seemed like they had reconciled, and I'm sure the toll bill wasn't the only thing, but it was pretty wild finding out that two dumb kids on summer break trying to go to a baseball game played a part in a marriage potentially breaking down. Story 28. I told my girlfriend we should stop by Starbucks on our way to my job, and I got her a tea for her sore throat. The lid came off and she spilled it all over herself. 2 weeks hospitalized, skin graft surgery, and M of 0 used to her. She's probably going to have permanent scarring, but feel it is bad. It wasn't an accident per se, but I didn't know what the outcome would be when I filed an intimacy harassment complaint against a high-level manager who worked in corporate for a grocery chain managing their remodels. He lost his job and his retirement benefits. He was very close to retiring. He was harassing every young female associate, and another manager actually encouraged us to file the complaint. He got what he deserved. Story 30. I divorced my ex-wife when I found out about her chronic cheating after dealing with years of her alcoholism. She immediately tried to get with the guy she was cheating with, who was married with kids. During a drunken fight between them, she called the cops and filed a false report against him. She had tried with me previously, was proven fake. In his drunken state, he panicked and eliminated himself. My ex had no remorse, instead posted on social media looking for sympathy. Now 2 kids don't have a dad, and a wife lost a shoot husband. I only feel bad for the surviving family. I have no doubt I saved my own life by leaving her without trying to work things out. In the following months, she tricked a guy into marrying her, got knocked up, bought a house, 12 months later, he reached out to me on Facebook asking for divorce lawyer advice and asking me to testify against her. She signed away her rights as a mother when she saw my name on the court paperwork. Story 31. When I was a punk teen, I left home and was living in a men's mission in HI. I had no license, had no car, but did have a love of surfing and a substances habit. I paid a friend of a friend like $50 to borrow a car, only to later get arrested for possession of a stolen car. Yep, it was stolen. And for substances charges. I refused to say who I got the car from or how I got it. I ain't no snitch. But when my property was inventoried, they saw a slip of paper with a name, address, and phone number on it, and hilariously, a note that said, "Go incognito." I had written that down BC. The friend said it when he was telling me about the dude I was borrowing the car from. In other words, dude's crooked, be safe and be quiet. They used that info to investigate the guy, learned he'd been running a chop shop basically, and he went to full-on prison. Years later, I'm clean, got my shoot together, started working in law enforcement even, and went to a funeral. The dude was also at that funeral. He came to me and said he held no hard feelings, that he found God in prison, changed his life, etc. It provided a tiny bit of closure for us both and was really nice. Story 32. I was a volunteer firefighter a while back. Pager went off for a medical assist. We often had to help ambulance with patient lifts, etc. I opted to give my spot on the truck to the rookie we had in training, figured a lift assist, he could help the guys and get that mental boost of being on the team. No biggie, I shouldn't have. Patient was an older guy who had been smoking in his wheelchair, wearing synthetics and with oxygen through nose. Caught fire, was a lift assist to get patient onto the helicopter. Didn't survive the flight. The rookie had to see that as his first call. He left brigade shortly after. Some shoot you really can never unsee, and he was just a high schooler trying to do something good for the community. Hope he's okay these days. I've seen a lot that'll never leave me either, but I have come to accept that is how life in passing can be, and I was prepared the moment the helmet was on for whatever came at me. Kid probably was his first experience of that, and unprepared for it. Story 33. I went to high school with this quiet kid named Jay. Kind of kid who sat at the back of the class, wore the same surplus military jacket every day, kinda greasy. But a few times we spoke and had a lot in common. Dude was super into video games and nerd shoot, and so was I. So I kinda took him under my wing and introduced him to my friends. We played D&D together, PC games, the works. I did my best to make him included in all the stuff we did because prior to this, his only friends were his younger brother and his few buddies. My best friend and I were already smoking plant substance at the time, and Jay knew about it. One day he asked to meet up with us after school and try plant substance for the first time. I was stoked. Dude was breaking out of his shell because of us. Talking to people, smiling, it seemed like a good thing. So we met up and popped his plant substance cherry after school. It was downhill rapidly after that. Turns out Jay has an addictive personality. Within 6 months of this quiet, reserved, kid smoking plant substance, he was ordering any research chems he could off the internet. This was before the Research Analog Act, so it was completely legal and easy to order shoot like entire vials of 25I and other substances. Dude started frying himself, acting erratically. He even dropped out of school before the next year. Senior year started. Keep in mind this dude had really fucking good grades prior to this. Kept his head down, did well in school, and floated by without anyone noticing. After high school, he got super into stimulants. Started with abusing the Vyvanse he was prescribed and likely didn't need since it upped the piss out of him. Then he moved on to cocaine, which I did indeed partake in with him. Wish I hadn't because I had no idea how far it would get out of control. He quickly moved on to meth. One night I was staying at his house with a buddy, woke up on his couch at like 7 a.m. to him and my friend standing over me literally smoking meth out of a gas station crack pipe. I was probably breathing that fudge shoot in. When I asked them what the fudge they were doing, they told me they were about to clean the house. I was flabbergasted. I got up and drove myself home, dangerously tired. Barely made it home without passing out, but I just could not stay there any longer. I stopped talking to him after that. Whole thing have me this foreboding feeling I couldn't shake. Turns out I was right. Dude started robbing convenience stores at gunpoint with a shotgun he bought at Bass Pro Shop using his employee discount. He even had the other buddy, who literally couldn't drive, no license and no experience, be his getaway driver. Somehow, some way, he never got caught AFIC. Later on, it came out he was into loli and other things you can imagine. Never got caught for that either. I was told he knew that he might in trouble, so he ran a magnet over every drive he had. I know a few people tried to talk to the police about it, but it never went anywhere. He's been accused of seeing his nephews, but it's also never gone anywhere. I washed my hands of it and him years ago. I know that it isn't exactly my fault, that someone else would have introduced him to substances, that I didn't steer him towards the fudge wild shoot he would do not too far down the line, but I still feel like it's kind of my fault. Answer: I had a somewhat similar experience go down. Was friends with this girl, and the first time she smoked plant substance was with me in high school. We started down the party scene, but I got out before it went from having fun to ruin your life. My friend did not. Addiction, homelessness, all the bad crap that comes with it. We haven't spoken in years, but I check on her on FB. She seems okay-ish. I've often wondered if I hadn't introduced her to plant substance, would she have not gone down that path? Story 34. In high school, we were putting away big set pieces after the talent show, and we stored one large item under a stairwell. This particular piece was very oblong and stuck out the side, partially obstructing a walkway. It wasn't a high traffic area, and we were in a rush to move it out, so we just left it as is. I later heard that a friend tripped on it, busting her face open, and needed dental work. I don't think it was ever connected that I was one of the people who put it there. Story 35. Working in CPS for a while, a lot of people say I've ruined their lives. Granted, some I have, but I don't think you should get to continue living as normal after essaying a child or torturing multiple children. Most families, I was able to get resources in the home to help. There's a couple that haunt me that I wish I had been more experienced, supported, and knowledgeable earlier in my career so I could have actually helped them. One man shot himself. I don't think he did it. I think it was a family member, but I ain't snitching. After being confronted with the evidence of years worth of him saying a disabled child, that family was shattered. There was no possible happy outcome there. Answer: when I was a teenager, we had a very kind man come to our place for a CPS visit, probably about 15 years ago. I was terrified of being separated from my little siblings, who I was basically second mom to, so I didn't admit to the neglect or severe emotional abuse in our home, but I had the sense that he knew anyway. He didn't seem mad at me for lying, just had genuine sympathy in his eyes. I always kind of wished I could follow up and talk to him about what was really going on back then, and thank him for being so gentle with everyone, though I doubt he'd remember us. He said he'd worked as an engineer for Boeing and then left when I was in finance, something more meaningful. Seemed like a really great man. All of that to say, not being able to help isn't your fault when sometimes everyone, including the ones you're trying to save, is actively working to prevent you from helping. But that doesn't mean it's not appreciated. Some of them might remember you as warmly as I remember him after dealing with years of... This is a fun one. I thought I was doing the right thing. Back in high school, I had a group of friends that I used to eat lunch with every day. We all lived in the same 2 or 3 neighborhood block radius, so it made sense that we all hung out in school and out of school. We will call one of the guys Dan. Well, one day at lunch, a girl that was in my ROTC class came up to me with her boyfriend and asked to talk to me. I said, "What's on your mind?" She says, "Why do you hang out with that guy?" And I said, "Because he's my friend." And she said, "You know he sad me, right?" And I said, "No, no one had ever said anything. Why didn't anybody ever tell me?" And she says, "I don't know, but I thought everybody knew." And I said, "Well, did you report it?" And she said, "No, because I didn't think the police would do anything." And I said, "Well, when did this happen?" She said, "About a month ago." Later on in the day, I'm walking to a different class, talking to another classmate of mine about the situation and how I was conflicted because I didn't know whether to report it or not. She made the decision for me by pushing me into the office of the ROTC program leader as we were walking past. I almost fell LOL, so I spilled everything I knew to him about the entire conversation. And he listens intently and is taking notes, and he says, "Okay, don't worry about it. He'll take care of everything." 2 or 3 days pass and nothing happens. Shortly after that, I get called into the principal's office with the principal, the ROTC program lead, and 2 police officers. They were extremely nice to me. They basically said, "Well, we interviewed everybody involved, and everybody, including the girl, agreed that nothing ever happened. Nobody was ever as sad." I was really scared because I thought I was going to get in trouble for making a false for a port or lying or something, even though I believed it to be the truth. I was a kid, you know. They said, "Nope, you're not in trouble. You did the right thing by coming to us. We just wanted to let you know the results of everything that had happened." So it came out that she lied about that and a bunch of other and she actually ended up leaving the state because she couldn't go to school here anymore because people kept bullying her. I guess she said different things had happened in the past with different people, and it came out that pretty much none of it was true. I don't feel bad for what I did, but I certainly didn't mean for that to happen because I thought I was doing the right thing. Story 37. A few years ago, I accidentally leaked a private message at work that caused my colleague to get fired. I didn't mean to, but it really still haunts me. If you like the content on the Vancher channel, please support it with a like. Let's continue. Story 38. There was this guy from school who I sort of grew up with. We were in most classes together starting from kindergarten all the way to the end of high school. We weren't friends, but maybe acquaintances. Never talked, but were friendly with each other. One day when I'm about 25-ish, he reached out over Facebook. We talked for a bit before he eventually asked if he could couch surf while he got his life together. I gave a wishy-washy answer because I wanted to help, but my younger sister, who knew his sibling, warned me not to. While I never had an issue with him in the past, I trusted my sister's judgment and eventually told him no. About a year later, there was a news article that he committed tragic end. I know I'm not the reason his life turned, but I still feel pretty bad about it. Answer. My best friend asked if she could live with me. I said no. She was an alcoholic. My dad was an alcoholic. I dislike being around tipsy people, don't drink myself. We remained friends, but she was upset with me. One morning we were going to hang out. It was 10 a.m. She was already blind tipsy. That was fine. She could come to my place. We could listen to music, have a smoke, except she wanted to buy more booze on the way. I said no. She ended up yelling at me, walked into the road. I was just like, dude, don't get hit by a car. She yelled something incomprehensible. I was just like, be careful. Anyway, she went to the psych ward, went missing for a week until I tracked her down at the hospital, let her family know. They swooped in, paid for her to go to a private psych detox facility that didn't really do standard rehab stuff. She came out still drinking, still using H as well. At this point, her family member kicked her out. I finally saw her again. She was under the impression I was mad as hell. She just had vague memories of arguing. Anyway, we arranged to hang out the next week. She fudge OD'd the next day. Would living with me have made a difference? She willingly went into treatment. I knew the place she went to usually catered to wealthy wine mums, wouldn't be the trauma-informed kind of place she'd needed. She'd had a horrible run. Lost her stepdad, mum boyfriend within 4 years. I feel like I turned my back on her when she needed me. Sure, I don't like being around tipsy people, but I'd prefer my friend partied too hard on my couch, picking bullshit fights with me than dead. It's really hard. The last memory I have of us actually hanging out is her swaying into the road. I'd known her since she was 11, I was 13, over 30 years. If I could turn back time, I don't even know what I'd do differently. Story 39. I was pissed that a kid in 5th grade kept copying off my tests, so I went and told the teacher, and after I bombed a test on purpose, and they compared answers, it was determined the kid was indeed copying off me. The kid was tested, and it was determined they were illiterate, and they were made to go back a grade. I don't really feel bad because fudge that guy, and hopefully he knows how to read now. Answer. At different ages, children can sometimes run into a roadblock which manifests in difficulty to read, calculate, or even put thoughts together. Sometimes this is not fully picked up by teachers or even fully understood by educators. This is not me blaming you. I mention it because these incidences are not rare. I read that it could afflict about 25 of school-going children. Story 40. I outed a school friend accidentally after stumbling across his photo on gay dating website. I told my brother about it while talking over the phone, and I wasn't aware he had me on speaker. His roommate basically told everyone. When I heard her in the background, I knew the secret was out. I felt so bad that I outed someone. I died a little inside that day. This happened 20 years ago now. I don't know if I ruined his life, but his girlfriend left him. His friend group was now aware he was trying to suck D at gay.com. It really wasn't cool. I really felt so bad. Answer. 2 of my friends in college, one M, other F, were unknowingly sleeping with the same guy who was not out. They had suspicions that he was maybe cheating and told me. I told them to talk to each other, which they did, and then confronted him. He subsequently dropped out of school, had a full ride, got married within a few months, had a kid a few months after that, and now he's been missing for 2 years. Story 41. Have not thought about this in quite some time. This was back in the early days of the internet. I would be chatting with people online, started talking to a girl, and we really hit off. Things go flirty, and then things move to the real world. We found out we were only a couple of hours away from each other, and she was coming to my area in a couple of weeks. Perfect. Set up our date, and we had a great time. A couple days later, I get a message from her husband. Apparently, I was not the only person she was visiting. He was hurt and disappointed by her actions. He wanted to reach out to just let us know what was happening. More of a, I am divorcing her, and you may be called into court. Did I feel bad about it? A little bit of guilt, but this was on her too. She was not forthcoming about her marriage. Should I have asked more questions? I was a lonely and horny 20-something. Not much thought given when someone wants to meet you. Story 42. I was at a friend's house with my boyfriend when we were 14. My friend and I are white. My boyfriend was black. Her racist dad happened to see him kiss me. He told us to leave. My friend badly wanted me to stay, but you know, it wasn't my house. I couldn't insist on staying, though now I wish I'd asked her to come with us. Maybe it would have made a difference. We left. Her dad went apeshit. Her mom came home from work to find him with his hands around her throat. Her mom separated from him, and she and my friend lived somewhere else for a while until my friend figured it out and dated an older guy and let him get her pregnant, so he'd have to marry her. He married her and joined the army. She had 2 kids from him and divorced him. The last time I talked to her, she was dating a guy who was nice except when he was drinking. She probably married him since she has a different last name now. Her daughter has been in and out of the court system. Her son died of a heroin overdose. He was dealing it too. Her grandson is in prison for takedown. Story 43. I used to have this friend in middle school who knew I liked him, but he identified as straight. I'll call him Luke for this story. We got handsy one day in middle school towards the end of the year, but nothing happened outside of that. Then about a year later, after our freshman year of high school, we met up again. Long story short, Luke and I dated that summer until he decided to break things off. Things were getting sort of serious for him, and it made him nervous having a boyfriend. He specifically said, "I don't know how to explain to girls in my school that might hit on me that I'm already seeing someone else." So we stopped dating and eventually stopped talking after that. Fast forward a couple of years, and Luke reached out to me again to catch up and see how I was doing. I was in a serious relationship with someone I thought I was going to be with for a while, though that didn't happen due to my then boyfriend being a sociopath. In the midst of us catching up, Luke drops a bombshell on me. He tells me that he's engaged, which I was happy for him. But he also said he regretted breaking up with me back then and that he had never had feelings for anyone like he did for me and hasn't since. He explained the real reason he broke up with me, saying that he didn't know how to come to terms with being bisexual and liking men. He couldn't come out then and certainly couldn't tell anyone about it now, given his current situation, which, by the way, his fiancée was either pregnant or had just given birth to his child. I can't remember which. He and I chatted for a bit longer, and I learned that he really wanted to explore his bisexuality more with his fiancée, but didn't know how to approach that conversation with her. I don't remember the specifics as this was years ago, but eventually I told him that if he cared about her and they had a good relationship, that he should talk with her about his feelings. Reader, I couldn't believe what happened next. He said that he'd talk to her about everything when he felt like it was the right time and she was ready. Several of months go by, maybe even a year, and I don't hear from him at all. Then I learned why. His fiancée went through his phone one day and found our messages. She saw him talk about being bi and how he still loved me and there would always be a place in his heart for me. She didn't take that well. They fought constantly, and eventually she unexpectedly took their child and moved halfway across the country, cutting off all contact with him. He had no idea where they'd gone, but he knew that it was because of our conversations. She said as much. I know it wasn't my fault, but I definitely felt responsible. He became even more depressed after that, got into substances, and things kind of went downhill for him. I know at some point he married someone else and they had kids together. I learned from a mutual friend, but I haven't heard from him in years now, and I still don't know if he ever gets to see his kid. Story 44. I worked at a Blockbuster in the early 2000s. The rule was you could have a card and you could have a note for one other person on your account to rent for you, like a spouse. A woman comes up to the counter with 3 kids in tow and a bunch of kids' movies. Gives me the card, says Harry. Names change. I pull up the account. There's a note that says Julie can rent for him. So I say, Julie? And he stops dead and says, I'm Kim. She leaves the movies, walks out with her kids, and I see her get into a minivan with a man's move to the real world, her screaming through the vehicle in the intervening wall. Story 45. My curious child, 5 or 6 at the time, asked me about that thing that looks like a camera hidden in a public family restroom while I was busy changing my other child's diaper. Upon further investigation, it absolutely was a camera, crudely duct taped in a very hidden spot and pointed directly at the toilet. I turned it into building staff who called the police, and later that day the guy who planted it was arrested when he came back to the building to retrieve it. Last I heard, he was in prison, and I feel awesome about that. Story 46. I don't think it was his life, but it cost him a job. Co-worker said he was going off for bereavement, saying a relative passed away. The next day he was off. I worked directly with his sister-in-law, and she wasn't off. I offered condolences. She asked WTF I was talking about. I told her about the relative she got on her phone texting and said nobody died. I thought, oh, shoot, and walked away. way. It started a big investigation because company pays you for bereavement days. He got fired for fraud. Answer: I tried to use bereavement days at work when my aunt was hospitalized and passed away. Payroll contacted me and pointed out the employee handbook, union job, said it was only for parents, grandparents, and children. I don't even remember if siblings were included. I think they weren't. I was surprised. Story 47. Changed my timesheet to use a few days of PTO instead of bereavement leave, but I wasn't reprimanded or anything. It helped that I wasn't lying about a relative's passing, though. Story 47. Source came to me asking me to go to the local paper that a local college resident master was beating his child. Did it, got published, guy got fired, took a plane home, and it crashed into the Everglades. Eliminate everyone. Don't feel too bad about it, as he was bad. And it wasn't just me, but still a little odd thinking my actions contributed to someone's passing. Accused of saying his nephew, not me, but my husband. He's the reason my parents are divorced. When my husband and I were engaged, I drove to work, and when I got there, instead of my car turning off like normal, it sounded like it just died. Let out its last breath and was gone. I called my fiancé and he drove over, had my car towed to a shop and got it looked at. He did all of this while I was at work. I later told my mom about this and she was floored. You mean he just took care of it? He wasn't upset? He wasn't irritated to have to take care of it? If that happened to me, your dad would take care of it, but he would be pissed and find a way to blame me. My mom left my dad a week later. To be fair, this was their second divorce, but my mom saw everything so clearly that day. Answer: yeah. Married for 20 years, I felt like I was turning into the nagging wife. Did everything and more at home while ex was complaining about his part of the chores, like taking out trash and vacuuming. Then one day I was at my best friend's, and her husband did something trivial that I commented with, well, but that didn't really help you out, did it? He looked at me with a mixture of pity and anger and said, well, it helped my wife. I came from a family where there was constant fighting, and somewhere deep inside, I felt like I already had it so much better because there was no fighting in my marriage. This friend's husband showed me that there were men doing more, like the bare minimum in a marriage. It somehow was the tipping point to finally get me to divorce. Story 49. I didn't do it per se, but I had an office mate friend who owed me money. I resigned, so haven't kept up with her, and every few months I text her a friendly payment reminder, and she always replies with an excuse and a promise to pay. I texted her one morning again, Beck, I needed money, and sent some harsh words, Beck. It's been more than a year, but there was no response this time. Later that day, I saw one of our common friends post on FB saying he'll be missing her, etc. Found out she committed tragic end that noon and that she had a gambling addiction around the time I resigned and owed a lot of people money. Idea where they'd gone. Out in just a year, left kids just like that. Don't gamble, people. Story 50. This isn't my story, but an old coworker, and it's timely because it's 911 today. Said ex-coworker was a manager at a different company, and at the time managed a team member who was not cutting it. He gave her lots of chances and opportunities, but was failing miserably at the job. He made the decision to fire her. She was terribly upset, loved the job company, begged him to stay. He had to say no. Fast forward a few weeks later, she gets a new job opportunity across the country, needs to fly out for the interview. She was on one of the planes that hit the Twin Towers on her way to that interview. He obviously had no control over any of this, but felt deep regret for a long time. What if he waited just a few more weeks to fire her, delayed her search for a new job, and then she wouldn't have been on that plane? That story always sticks with me. Story 51. A girlfriend's father died in Vietnam, but she got no benefits. Very, very early internet, found his military records, and discovered that her parents had divorced prior to his passing. Mom had been lying for years. Ops. If you like the content on the Vancher channel, please support it with a like. Let's continue. Story 52. I got an incredible, wonderful man and dedicated father and colleague made redundant. This guy had been in the company for decades and had been shuffled around departments when his job would be automated and moved to the next. But we all loved him and wanted him around, so any gap in a team he could fill he'd get, until I opened my stupid mouth. We were getting paid a pittance because our roles were initially entry, but we'd modernized the system so much that all of my staff practically held high degrees in our software and were now irreplaceable, and I was the change manager, and super user, so I knew everything. I threatened to walk if my team weren't paid more. They wanted to keep me, so found the budget for our pretty small raises by eliminating him. Then they gave me a bonus for it. I bought his family a table tennis setup. I hope he found another place to light up every day, but I still feel terrible. Story 53. Oh man, I have one. When I was like 19, I was riding a bicycle to work and got hit by a landscaping truck pulling out of a gas station. The two guys were so apologetic, helped me up, checked out the bike, offered to give me a ride, everything. Nice guys, and I was okay. Just stunned, really. Well, some lady in the parking lot called the police. Turns out they didn't have documents. Cops arrested them both and impounded the truck, and then gave me a ticket for riding my bike wrong. I still feel bad because if I had just got my shoot together faster and left, they could have left before the cops got there and ruined their shoot. Total time was less than 5 minutes from hit to cops. They only show up that fast when you don't want them, I guess. Story 54. I work in a public library, and because of how our book hold system works, I once accidentally informed some poor guy that he was likely getting a divorce. His wife had placed several DIY divorce books on hold, and they had a shared library account. When I called their landline phone number, the only one on the account, to tell them that their book holds were in, he answered the phone, and when I explained why I was calling, he asked what the book titles were. Without thinking, I rattled them all off. The Michigan Divorce Book, the Divorce Book, What Every Michigan Married Man or Woman Needs to Know, etc. I think there were 4 or 5 of them altogether, so it seemed pretty inevitable that he was headed for the single life. We don't typically share our patrons' private account information with anyone, including what books they have checked out or on hold, but if they are sharing an account with another person, we have no idea which person on that account has placed the hold, and sharing an account means that all the account info is shared freely amongst all the people on the account. I know it's not my fault that this guy got a divorce, but that's a heck of a way to find out, and I do feel bad about that. Story 55. I had a crappy office sales job when I was 24 and worked with a bunch of younger people like myself. We used to goof around a lot, and one day the president of the company sent out an all-employee email about something or other. We started talking about playing a game of email chicken. As you know, when you click the send button on an email, it doesn't actually send it until you release your mouse button. I dared a guy I worked with write a reply all email, around 2,000 employees, that said, "Gargle my balls." I did the same thing. We both had to hover our mouse arrow over the send button and click our mouse. I was able to successfully move my cursor off the send button, but he did something wrong and ended up sending the email, and long story short, got fired. The first few minutes after it happened were sheer panic. It didn't necessarily ruin his life, but it definitely threw a monkey wrench in it. Story 56. In the late 90s, I was working a pizza delivery job. Ended up getting a friend of mine a job there, something he did for a few more years because it was good money. He ended up moving to a different chain, and 20 or so years ago, he got ambushed by a couple of thugs who called in a fake order to mug the driver. He suffered some brain damage as a result, and it derailed his studies. Granted, he had a lot of issues anyway, and there's no certainty he would have been able to finish his degree and go into that field, but this incident didn't help. That's it for this video. Don't forget to support Vancher and my second channel, Vanchoose. See you soon.